We turn then to Kill a Mockingbird, again looking at some of the idea stimulus for things you can actually write in the exam. Now this book is a sprawling book. It really does have so many things, and there are so many important characters. So we've gone through all the main ones here, but hopefully that'll be enough for your purposes. But obviously feel free to add to this in any way that you see fit. So first of all, the way it's written, okay, so obviously the setting is at the time, it's over a few years. It's very realistic. You've got some uncomfortable elements obviously throughout the book, but that's all there to give you a real sense of the time. It's encompassing. It really actually does have all different kind of traits in it. You've got happy moments, sad moments, funny moments, etc., but you've got them in multitudes, etc., and there's a real scope over the whole book for it to change, obviously, even though it's all set in this one area. And it also covers all aspects of life. By that I mean, obviously we see someone actually grow up, we see someone with their neighbours, we obviously have friends coming from different places. You look at race, you look at prejudice, you look at adult reactions. It is really a whole community kind of working, involving at all levels there, from tiny children to very old people about to die. Language and dialects then, you've got, which is quite interesting about it, it's got very mature children. Obviously you can speak better than probably most children of their time can, because of the way they've been raised, and you can obviously see this from the fact that they go to school. Scout goes to school and she's told off for being able to read and write, which her teacher doesn't expect her to do that at the moment. You've got the accents kind of which show class and also kind of show their place in society. So there's obviously the way the blacks talk when we visit them in church with Scout, obviously the way Atticus talks, the way Yules talk, and obviously that constantly shows class, etc. And the dialects obviously give us the region and the expectation that comes with the character, and that's what shows us their standing, perhaps. Obviously the way Yule describes his daughter's rape in the court scene obviously is quite filthy and degrading, and obviously it shows as well like his, not just his standing in society, but obviously his actual feelings, or his actual sensitivity, or lack of sensitivity should I say, towards his daughter. Onto Calpurnia's doubling, and that's just basically a reference to the fact that she speaks one way when she's around white people and one way when she's around black people, but that's just indicative of what life was like for people who had almost two lives at the time, etc. It's also interesting just in terms of the language as well, just in terms she's the only adult female that we actually meet who's not referred to as Miss anything, so obviously that tells us a lot about how the way people are referred to. And also we get a lot of technical language. Obviously we've got legalese because of Atticus's job is full with legal terminology, etc., and the students, his children actually try and pick up on that. And there's also quite a lot of getting language wrong. There's a couple of instances where people think they mean something and it means something else, obviously most notably Bob Yule with the word ambidextrous. The tone throughout is an authoritative innocence. So basically, and that comes about obviously because we've got the adult who actually kind of is commenting a lot later, and we've got it through the eyes of the child, or we're expected to believe it through the eyes of a child. So it's kind of an interesting balance there. Even though this innocence, normally we'd kind of feel like we weren't really sure of whether everything was coming to us as true, but we know that it's all got an authority behind it because it's the adult, Harper Lee, commenting on perhaps her younger self through Scout. And also it's a social comment on loads of things, obviously, like race and all the things that we'll come up to in themes, but it is quite direct. I mean, we do hear Scout literally tell us, obviously with regards to her disregard for the education system that comes up several times, she is literally telling us what she thinks there. There's a lot of sentiment, there's a lot of feeling for all the characters in the book, even the ones that we sometimes don't like. There's almost like a sorriness for them, and obviously all the people that Scout respects and likes, there's a lot of love and respect for them. And we've got a lot of foreshadowing in the tone as well, especially in the way that part one is actually set up for part two, which we'll come on to then with first of all the structure. You've got this over a long time, okay, so we can see this over quite a few years, and basically that gives us a great time to actually grow with the characters. You know, you really get a complete sense of them and how they're changing. You've got two sections as well, and basically they kind of follow the thing of two Mockingbirds, and one's kind of more on the first part is really to do with more maybe background and really just following on the first Mockingbird, like seeing how Boo Radley comes into it. And then for the second part, we pretty much leave Boo Radley quite a lot, and we go to a second Mockingbird, a second innocent person, and that goes on to Tom Robinson and his trial, and the idea that obviously this is basically the Mockingbirds are to different people. Obviously, Boo's Mockingbird really to the he's kind of like an outsider to the children, but he's a Mockingbird, and then Tom is obviously an outsider to the white community. So basically, chapter 2 or section 2 basically is chapter 1 on a larger scale, and obviously there's a lot of setup in part 1 for part 2. Obviously when we first hear about the Yules, and obviously when we first hear about some of the people in the back community, and obviously you got this idea of the Mockingbird kind of put into us. Virtually all of it obviously comes from Scout, which gives us kind of a very intimate idea. Obviously she overhears a lot of conversations. There's only 1 or 2 bits that come from other people, and they're told to Scout, and they feel a little more distance as a result. And obviously just a reminder again, this is all coming from Harper Lee as an adult, which is really important because it shows that the author has had time to disseminate these things and obviously shape them into the work. It's not coming without the reflective understanding that an adult would have. So symbolism then that are used throughout the book. Obviously you've got the Mockingbird and other birds. Obviously the sign of innocence, etc. Obviously the family name is Finch. So obviously there's a reference to the ideas of freedom and all that would go with that, with the idea of birds. You've got the name. Sorry, I haven't put it down here, but the name Atticus itself is also a symbol of apparently he was named after someone in Roman times who refused to actually pick sides during the civil war that was actually occurring in Rome, and so obviously there it's a very balanced view, and the name's kind of taken on such meaning. You've also got the tree, which is the way that Boo communicates with people, but obviously, communicates with the kids. But then what you've actually got there is the idea of communicating through nature, and then obviously it's kind of harking back to nature, and perhaps in that our human nature, where everyone should be equal. And obviously that's a setup for the second chapter. But it's really important as well that kind of gets blocked up because we actually lose that communication between people. Obviously, then we're just back to the stereotypes and prejudices people have when the tree's hole is actually closed over. You've got the symbols of the characters, which obviously represent just all different parts of society, like a microcosm. So like gems supposed to hopefully represent the future generation, etc. You've got the destroying of the flowers, which is symbolic of hopefully a change of attitudes, because it's Mr. Bose's flowers are actually broken, which is a good reflection on old ideas being destroyed, etc, etc, etc. And you kind of see this as well with people like Aunt Alexandra, whose attitudes changes slightly towards the end. You got the symbols of prison. Obviously the Radley house is a prison for Boo, and obviously the actual prison that Tom is placed in at the end, where he's actually killed. And obviously there you've got the idea of the birds, the Mockingbirds, being trapped, etc, not being able to do what they are supposed to do. Obviously the kids represent a new generation, and as I've just mentioned a minute ago, Atticus. So some of the themes then that we actually come across quite a lot. You've got growing up, and in there we learn overtly. So basically there's sometimes where the kids are taken to one side and they're actually told XXX. So for example, the idea of to sin, to kill a mockingbird, etc. And sometimes they actually learn discreetly. They actually learn discreetly in terms of maybe Scout watching Jem cry for the first time. It's kind of like she picks up on that and she learns without actually learning. And after the attempted lynching, she only learns afterwards what they're actually trying to do, but not actually at the time. There's a lot of idea about growing up in your place in society. Obviously differentiation between white and blacks. Obviously that will have different relevance in different countries and different times. And also about perhaps growing up to be a lady, as Scout is actually encouraged by her Aunt Alexandria. These are things she actually needs to know. We get a lot of idea about growing up and becoming more open-minded as you're exposed to more. So, for example, when Calpurnia takes the children to the Blacks' church and they actually see what's going on there as well, they're getting a whole other insight into other parts of life. And also, just when we come into section 2, how they're actually looking across at all of the treatment of Tom Robinson and the way that the jurors acted and how some of them fell and what the outcome was, etc. Obviously, you have to grow up a lot there and realize not everything works the way it should. You've got the idea of people being equals as well in terms of their place in society and who's unequal in society. So obviously, you've got the Atticus probably is the head of all that, and then if you drop off to the right with the whites, then you've got the people like Bob Yule, etc. And over on the other side, you'd have obviously the blacks. The approach to Boo, obviously how they see him at the beginning, obviously contrasts massively to how they see him at the end. And they're obviously told, that basically the lesson is not to go with their prejudices and stereotypes. Obviously being attacked, now obviously that's quite a traumatic experience. Obviously it could make you quite paranoid and etc. But that's obviously something else that would actually really add to their learning and growing up, and then watching how their father deals with it, etc, etc, etc. Growing up as well, Jem actually starts to teach Scout some things. So basically he actually comes to a point where he tells her she should be addressing different, etc. And also with Jem, he actually gets called Mister, which shows how much he's grown. He's really kind of moved into his being a young man rather than being a child. And obviously they're going through, this is quite interesting, they're going through different stages at different times. So basically Scout's going through a period of going into her early teens, whereas Jem's going into what would be the equivalent of college. So basically obviously they've got completely different lives there, whereas when they're younger they have similar kind of routines. And it said so much, apparently Jem grows away from Dill and Scout in terms of the games they play, etc. Obviously, we've got prejudice, one of the main themes all the way across, obviously with regards to the groupings in society and how people are actually placed, their levels, and obviously race. That's a huge one throughout the book. Obviously, and you've got the hypocrisy there as well, which is quite interesting with regards to the church group who want to help black people on the other side of the world, but don't help black people who are right actually next to them. You've got the prejudice against about, again, the idea of helping, because there's no way. One of the main things that Tom Robinson actually brings himself down on is the fact that he says he feels sorry for her and wants to help Mayella, and obviously that's just completely unseen. There's a huge prejudice against a black person thinking that they can help a white person at this time. Also prejudice against women. For example, women aren't allowed to vote in the they're not allowed to vote, they're not allowed to sit on the jury, and obviously there's other instances as well where they're expected to act in a certain way or be a certain way, etc. There's prejudice against the outcasts, which is most clear with regards to Tom, obviously, and obviously within the kids' own minds against Boo. And you can see again, hopefully, how that's actually the two sections are actually reflecting each other quite strongly there. And obviously the prejudice against one's family, because that's not something not really touched upon very much. But Jem at the start, he actually thinks Atticus is a bit of a dweeb, bit of a loser. Doesn't really have much respect for him. And obviously after the incident with the dog, and obviously watching his father through other things, I mean, he really does grow to respect him. We'll come to that a little later. You've also got the struggles, so people struggling against society. So that basically just means against like the way everyone is actually, how things are actually set in your society, the unspoken rules of how people should be treated and how things should be done. Against your community, that's more literal. That's obviously where people go to argue against each other or actually stand up against the people who are actually going to do wrong. So obviously Atticus, when he goes to the trial. Mr. Bose's struggle against drugs is also something that we come up against, which is really reflective of all kind of ills that would be in society. I mean, obviously here she has an addiction to, I think it's morphine, and this could be along with anything, alcohol, etc., and other different kinds of drugs. And obviously there could be a parallel that can be drawn against, if you want to make it, Bob Yule. And obviously he's actually used his drug of choice, the alcohol, to actually, he's succumbed to it and obviously gone to attack the children at the end of it as well. So it actually shows kind of different elements of character. There's a struggle just against injustice in general, how people should be treated, shown through the actual trial and the court case Atticus takes. And in the writing of the book itself, there's a struggle against the social historical context at the time, because obviously the black civil rights movement in the 50s was really picking up, taking off, developing. And for Harper Lee to write this at the time, obviously in some circles it wouldn't have been taken down very well at all, and she would have got heavily criticised for it, but thankfully the book has, hopefully deservedly, stood the test of time. And also there's again the struggle against hypocrisy with obviously Aunt Alexandria refusing to continue to go to the meetings after obviously the trial. You've got bravery shown throughout. Obviously on a small scale you've got Jem running after his trousers, even though obviously it scared him, but Jem is the kind of person apparently who never backs out on there. You've got Atticus obviously defending Tom, even though he knows it's not going to be good for his reputation, and obviously he knows also that He's not going to win. And obviously you've got Aunt Alexandra, sorry. And one form of bravery is just the fact that she actually comes. I mean, she's there for her actual family. I mean, she could distance herself from Atticus in his radical thinking of equality, etc., etc., etc. She could distance herself from it, and obviously just kind of land herself in her family's reputation, which is obviously quite a grounded one with links to slavery, etc. And you've also got Mr. Bose, who fights to the very end against her addiction. Okay, so we look briefly at characters, and we look at Scout. Obviously, Scout's our commentator throughout the whole thing. She tells us what's going on. She's supported and loved by her brother and Atticus, which is really, really important because it gives an insight again into this is why Bob Yule's quite important as an opposite to Atticus in almost every way. He can't speak properly, he isn't very developed, and he doesn't really love and care for his children properly, etc. And he ends up in a certain situation. Obviously, whatever social reasons behind that, I'm not commenting, I'm just saying what's in the book. She's a tomboy, which kind of gives her a more adventurous feel than maybe we'd get from some girls her age. She's a learner the whole way through. She's picking up loads of things and obviously dispensing them with us. She's advanced for her age as well, which is really, really important because maybe she can pick up on things and see things that other children and other people in there can't. And there's an innocence obviously throughout which disarms people, obviously with the lynch crowd that are actually coming into it. And also that innocence is very relevant for us because it actually keeps us on her side. We actually enjoy her company, enjoy growing with her. She grows all the way throughout the novel, which is really important because this is actually, obviously, if she can grow and change and pick up so much, the idea is that we grow, pick up and change just as much in our ideas, perceptions. So Jem, he's Scout's companion really, which is quite, obviously if you're going to have a companion, the best one to have, or the most logical one in a structure would actually be a brother. And basically he gets to do things that Scout might not be able to do. So maybe like with regards to showing a couple of elements of bravery, maybe we wouldn't have believed if Scout had done some of them, so they actually come through Jem. When we want to see innocence, we can't see innocence and an understanding of how painful the outcome of the trial is. We can't see them both at the same time. So Jem's reaction and him not wanting to talk about it, etc., Jem is a great vehicle for us to actually understand that. In contrast to the companion, because we get Scout's. Sorry, in the situation of companion, because we get Scout's view on it, and then Jem's is on occasion slightly different, which just gives us two wonderful views in very close proximity to each other. He's a mini Atticus, and that actually changes from the beginning, where he doesn't have much respect for Atticus, and in the end he actually has full respect for his father to the point where he actually wants to become a lawyer and maybe be more like him, again symbolic of hopefully a future generation. He seems more emotional than Scout at times. Obviously he's a little more trouble, and he gets a little more angry, and obviously he cries, even though it's a new kind of cry that Scout isn't very familiar with. So basically it maybe shows how sensitive he is. He's a leader in the sense of organising the little games, etc., that they're going to do, and basically that's really important because he may be the one then, obviously this may be steering us in a direction where he could become a mini Atticus. Again, he's sensitive to the situations at the trial and also ultimately to the situation of Boo Radley when he understands things, and he's also sensitive to how things are when he's actually telling Scout that she has to change, etc., and when he knows there's not much he can do about certain aspects of what happens in the book. He obviously represents the next generation, and he grows too. Obviously, as mentioned earlier, he was referred to as Mr., etc., etc., etc. Probably the most important character then, Atticus. Well, Atticus offers great variety in his personality. It's just this wonderful reflection of all good traits. He's a teacher, he's a protector, he's an idealist, he's not racist, he's a social reformer. He's all these things. Obviously there's lots of references to knowledge, to him actually sitting and reading, and obviously the terms they can use. He's a protector in several ways. Obviously he's protecting the kids as best he can from his own hand. He says he doesn't actually want to ever hit the children. He's a protector as well in terms of when the dog could run around biting people, and obviously he's got this marksman quality where he can, a bit too perfect some would say, where he actually shoots the dog and obviously kills it in one shot. He attempts to protect Tom, and then he's got people, it's quoted as saying some people are looking for an outright acquittal of Tom at the beginning, but it's only the weight of social injustice that's actually trying to weighs down against him. It's not the other lawyer that beats him, it's just society at the time. He's very patient, very understanding. He doesn't mind taking time out to explain things. He's a contrast again with many other people in the book, obviously. Most notably the other residents who are a little bit racist and prejudiced, obviously, and Bob Yule. He's not pig-headed at all. This comes through really strongly at the end, where he understands the police officers' eventually, should I say, understands the police officer's recommendation that they should let sleeping dogs lie and not really go into the details of how Bobby Ewell died. But obviously, it's still noble that at the beginning he wants to uphold it and he wants to make sure justice is done. But obviously, in this one, he does learn that. Obviously, his name, as mentioned earlier, it won't take sides, and he respects all people. Obviously, he treats Calpurnia very, very well, and obviously she has a large part to play in the household. So is he being represented as the ideal of a man? And is he a realistic man? You know, do we really see this? I mean, in many other books you'll find characters painted. And if you want to make this actual comparison, it might be worth making, but just make it as a side point. Don't make a big deal out of it. There's another book called Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, where there's another father figure there who's very almost perfect for a long time, etc., etc., etc. But then there's this one point where Pa, the father of Cassie and the kids, at one point he gets really angry and he just slams, I think he slams a table, etc. And then there's this one element, that's a black father, by the way, in contrast, and it's just this one element where we actually get to see this kind of real human side to him, but we really don't get that much from Atticus. And maybe is that more to do with his temperament? Is that more to do with the position he has? Is it more to do with his job? But if you do read up something on Roll of Thunder, it might be an interesting comparison to make. Again, the character you're looking for is called Pa, and that book was written by a lady called Mildred Taylor, which covers similar themes but from a black perspective. And a lot of what you can actually look and find in Atticus, you can actually extend to Miss Maudie, which is quite nice. So some of these things, just the not being pig-headed, won't take sides, etc., etc. You can use some of those for Miss Maudie's character as well. So we move on then to Calpurnia, and she's typical of the time. They're one of this group of people that have to walk a tightrope, between two communities, which offers a very interesting link between the two diverging cultures, and obviously how the communities work side by side, or work segregated, as it were. And also she's a link in terms of not just for us, the reader, to get an insight into the black community, but also as a link for the black community to access into the white community sometimes. Obviously when the black people bring Atticus presents at the end, that's really obviously touching, and maybe they wouldn't have been able to do it as freely had Calpurnia not been a link there. And it's really actually nice to just show that appreciation for what he tried to do. Obviously widens horizons of the children, takes them somewhere, and obviously shows them like to an aspect of life they haven't seen before, so they get more of an understanding. And obviously there's some kind of question over whether she's the mother figure, really. Obviously she cooks, she disciplines, she kind of looks after things. I mean that in a classical sense. I'm not making a judgment on the position of women in the house or anything, but basically offering the children that mother figure. And is that kind of ideal for Atticus? I mean, is he really doing this just because maybe he's too you don't imagine Atticus being the most romantic of people, so maybe this is just the perfect thing for him, someone that he knows he knows where he stands with, and there's this person who's actually got a good influence on the children and takes care of the house in a certain way, and maybe that's kind of like perfect for him. So is it a mother figure, or is it a convenience for Atticus? Obviously something you can develop and extend in your essay if you so choose. So we've got Boo, the outcast. He's an object of fear. He's kind, he's misunderstood. He's kind when he obviously puts when the fire happens and he puts the shawl or a jacket over his Scout's shoulders, and obviously in the toys that he tries to leave him. He's an object of fear from the children from the actual beginning, and he's an outcast because he's an outcast by being kept in, which is obviously slightly ironic. Obviously he's at the mercy of his family there. He's misunderstood, and obviously we see that from the development of the beginning and end. That's always a good thing to actually discuss. And obviously he's described as ghost-like at some points, but then in the end obviously you got this idea of this friendly ghost, this spectre, and we wonder, obviously because he was there at just the right time, we wonder, was he always watching Jem and Scout and watching over them? And obviously in the end he's obviously brave, and he does what in this case could be considered the right thing. And then we've got Tom. Obviously Tom represents another Mockingbird. He's innocent, and this is quite clearly shown, and obviously he's disabled, which is obviously not just the disability he has in terms of his left arm, but also his disability that he has from his status in society as a black man. It's really interesting as well, because one of the things that really obviously the lawyer makes a huge deal of is when he actually says he felt sorry for her, and that's Harper Lee's representation of some things that just can't be said. Obviously Atticus would never have tried to use that in his own defense, because he knows the social impact of what it would have had, but Tom, just being innocent and obviously being manipulated slightly perhaps, or invited, say it, by the opposition lawyer, he just makes that huge mistake, and obviously it goes on from there. And then obviously we go on for the despair that he actually feels and the injustice, and obviously we see what it actually leads to, what it actually comes to, and it reflects that. And that's kind of the summary of some black people's situation, you'll be wronged and then killed, or you'll be wronged and then die at the time, which is obviously quite a sad reflection of society at the time. So in developing how you're going to answer this, remember to plan, mention a point, quote, explain the meaning, analyze some language. Please do that. That's going to get you loads of marks. And link it to another character, idea, or point of the book. Try and do all three a couple of times each, just 2 or twice each. So if you're writing 6 paragraphs or 4 or 5, 6 paragraphs, just always analyze something in the language, refer it back in the book, refer it to another character, make a link. It's basically just trying to make it grow as much as possible. So if you imagine your entire essay, if it were to get a C, it would just kind of be this bunch of stems. If it was to get a B, then it would be stems with these buds coming out of it. And if it was to get an A, then it would be this stems, buds, and obviously flowering, fully flowering. It's just making those connections, those extensions, just make your essay grow and hopefully in some way come to life. Good luck.